Hello, hello. Okay, so today we're talking all about where is your focus, okay? And I have three main things that I want to go over today that hopefully won't take too long. So, where is your focus? If you're brand new to me, my name is Susan McVeigh. I'm a married mama of two and a business sales and wealth expert. And I wanted to talk about three key components that I think will help you. Okay, so before we begin, hello, Judith. I would love to know, number one, if you're live or on the replay, where you are watching from. So you can put that below. And then I also want to know, what are you currently focusing on? Is this an area that you're just like, yeah, high five, Susan, I got this slam dunk? Or is this an area where you are struggling? It's the last day of January as of the time of this recording, January 31st. So we've had a whole month of new year, new you, and all that kind of jazz. And there's typically like a slump where, as go-getter as you are, there's going to be a period where you kind of lose sight of the prize, so to speak, right? So today I wanted to empower you, but also encourage you and maybe show you a different perspective as to why it is that you might be struggling, if you are struggling. Because I think it's a lie that all of us know what we're doing all the time, right? Like we're all, I heard something this morning as I was on my walk, and they said, you know, chances are your parents, when my parents had me, I thought they were old, but they really weren't that old. I had my kids when they were older, when I was older than where my parents were. And he said something that really just struck with me today, which is, we're all trying to do the best that we can with what we got. And sometimes we forget that the people who have impacted us the most, like our parents and our teachers, are probably younger than where we are now at the time that we have those memories. Does this make sense? Like, some of my most vivid memories are from my parents and from school teachers who are younger than I am now, which kind of blows my mind. And when I was little, it felt like they knew everything, right? That they were just like, wow, you know everything. You're so smart. And I think sometimes this becomes the benchmark of what we're trying to compare to, and it can impact what we are or aren't focusing on. Okay. So that's a bit of context. I don't know who needed to hear that message. So, three things that will help us to determine where our focus is, and more importantly, why it might be challenging for us to focus in the areas that we desire, right? So this is, again, not a place where we're gonna like judge or shame or guilt you into like you shoulda, woulda, coulda, but this is really just to provide some perspective and to allow you to be empowered to then make appropriate choices such that you can have the outcomes, the desires, and the goals that you want. So the most pressing question that I want you to ask yourself as you go through this with me is, where is your focus? So three things that I wanted to cover off. Number one is why we are trying, or sometimes we try to make things harder than they actually need to be. Now, I'm going to give you a story that helps paint this perspective. I had a client years ago who came to me and she needed help. She wanted more clients, which is why a lot of people come and ask for my help. She wanted to make more money. Money in her business meant more clients. And so we gave her a strategy and it worked. However, before it started to work, she needed to do the work. Does this make sense? And so every single time, I don't have my extra phone with me. Pretend this is the phone, okay? I know it's empty, but that's because I'm on a phone already. She wanted to live a life of freedom. She had young kids, school-age kids, and she wanted to be able to enjoy her life while they were at school and do her business. But then when they were home, she wanted to be focused on her family. And so she was working round the clock. And so when she came to me and said, I don't want to work so hard, but surely there must be a better way. And I said, there is. Here's the strategy. Now, she knew that it worked because she'd seen it work for me, and she'd seen it work for many of my clients. And once we had determined that this was the strategy for her, she went and started implementing, and she started to feel some traction. Now, here's the thing. Before she actually saw the full results, she had to have faith and belief that it was going to work for her. So instead of focusing on, it is working, it is working, it is working, she was constantly checking her phone and being like, is it working? Is it working? Is it working? Do I have any messages? Did they respond? Like, she kept checking. And she compulsively couldn't stop herself because she was so worried that it wasn't enough. She was so concerned that it wasn't what she was doing before. Now, remember, what she was doing before wasn't working either. She came to me because she knew that what was going on before was actually making her feel worse. It was burning her out. She was exhausted. She had no bandwidth, no patience, no love for her family, because all of her was being spent during her waking hours focusing on growing her business. And so when we implemented this strategy, it immediately gave her more space. She didn't know what to do with all of that. And so instead of focusing on, because I remember very vividly, she texted me from a cafe overlooking the ocean where she lived. And she was like, Susan, this is my dream. I'm having coffee, and like, I created something, I posted it, people are responding, and I get to just relax. And I said, yeah, that's kind of the point, right? Like, the point is for you to live your life and not to have your work be your entire life. But because she was so used to working so hard and for everything feeling like it was so difficult, that guess what she did? Instead of, because I said, enjoy, just, live your life and have faith and trust that now we just need to work the strategy, right? We have to just work the strategy. And so instead, she couldn't stop herself, because as high achievers, I'm guaranteeing that chances are you love doing stuff. You love the thrill of the hunt and the chase, and just like the excitement that comes as a result of doing. And chances are, if you're anything like me or my clients, you have had an example of parents who are really hard workers, who do a lot of stuff. And so a lot of your focus, your time and attention in your past has been on the more you do, the more you get, the more you do, the more you make, where really the less you do, the more you should make and could make. It's really about leverage, and it's really about where your focus is, where your time and attention and the resources, the experience that you have, and using the tools and the systems and the people that are available to you. And so this wonderfully amazing woman started to get busy getting busy, and started to fill the space of those hours and those precious minutes that we had now given her so that she could live her life. She started doing busy work instead. And again, this like constant checking, like, is it working? Is it working? Is it working? It's like watching a pot of water and trying to think that it's going to make it go faster simply because you will it to, simply because you're like, please work, please work. Like, I need to eat. I need to eat. That sense of desperation of it's got to work. People can feel that. People can feel that. And so we make things harder. So that's point number one, right? Like, we make things harder, or we try, and it feels harder because we feel like we need to justify what we desire. We feel like we need to justify or be worthy of the outcome, so that it means that we have deserved it. Does any of this sound familiar? So instead of focusing on what we actually want, we start to focus on what we don't want or what we don't have. And that is the wrong focus. Okay, so where is your focus? If you're focusing on what you don't have, what you don't want to have happen, chances are, and this goes beyond, law of attraction, manifestation, all that stuff. It really is like what we focus on is where our attention goes. And when we have our attention, this is just brain science, it's called the reticular activator system. And so if you Google that and look that up, it's the same thing as when you buy a new car or you buy a sweater, and all of a sudden, everybody's driving that car, right? Like you buy a red car, everybody's driving a red car. You buy a specific brand, make, and model, and you're like, what gives? How come I never noticed this before? It is because once you have something, your brain automatically focuses on that, right? Hello, Gloria. So it's sometimes unintentional in that if this is all you've known, if all you've known is that, I speak from my own experience. My parents used to say, like, you need to work hard. Like, and that was part of the identity of what we had is we are hard workers. Who else has said that? I'm a hard worker, right? So what happens when you suddenly have stepped into an opportunity where it's no longer about working hard to get what you want, right? And we've all heard the saying, work smarter, not harder. And yet, it's not the smartest people who are actually getting ahead, right? It's not always the smartest who are further ahead. And the smartest people are sometimes the ones who are actually working way harder than we need to be. And I guarantee that part of this is because you are holding on to something. You might feel guilty, you might feel ashamed, you might just feel there might be resistance in your conscious or subconscious brain that is connected to a sense of, if I didn't work hard enough for this, I don't deserve it. If I didn't work hard enough for this, then I don't get it. Like it won't come. If I don't work hard, then who am I? I no longer fit in with my family or my community or even my former workplaces. Does this make sense? So we can make things way harder than they need to be simply because we focus on the wrong things. We focus on working hard. We focus on what we don't want. And so what we don't want or what we don't want to have happen continually shows up because that's where our focus is. That's where our attention is. So we are going to find more opportunities for that, just like if you have a red car, you're going to see the red car over and over and over and over again. Okay. We have to get into the habit or the ability of awareness to know, hey, what's going on here? And it is uncomfortable. Like for that amazing client who, man, we tried, right? Sometimes it takes a bit. Sometimes, and I can't control that, right? This is really about your readiness, your aptitude to let go of what was in order to step into what is and what can be. And that can happen instantly. I talked about this the other day. It's really about overcoming our humanness. Your spirit already knows what is true, right? And that's what causes this sense of resistance. So when you have your attention and your focus on one thing and you keep getting diverted back, I guarantee you there is a part of your being, your psyche, whether it's your body, your mind, your will, your emotions. So for me, that comprises our soul, right? There could be even an element of your spirit, but whatever part of you is anchored usually in the past, and you might not even realize this, that's where awareness is really important. That's why you do need to focus. You do need to really think through, what am I focused on? So that's number one, why we make things much harder, okay? We're trying to justify when we get it and be like, I worked really hard for this. Well, don't you still deserve it if you didn't have to work so hard for it? Like, does it make it any less worthwhile? Chances are it's going to actually make it sweeter But we're so used to and conditioned to these messages from childhood, from society, from establishment, that the harder we work, the better it is. The harder we work, the better of a human we are. These are all false. It's fake news. Okay. The amount of work that you put in does not determine the kind of person that you are. Obviously, there is some correlation. There is some connection between your work ethic and discipline, as an example, or self-control, or just commitment, right? Perseverance. There's lots of great things that come as a result of doing work. But does it have to be hard? No, right? I mean, I believe God gave us all of our faculties, all of our gifts and talents. For some people, they're naturally gifted in opera singing. Okay? I can sing, but I am not an opera singer. Should they be doing something differently than singing opera in order to make a lot of money, to be known around the world, to impact lives and bring beauty into the world? And we would then say they don't deserve to have what they have simply because it comes so easily for them, because it's a natural talent. Or maybe even if it's something that they've worked really hard for. Like, I just talked to somebody today and she loves rugby. That's this her jam. Part of the reason why she loves game day, because I said, well, what's the best part? And she said, oh, I love game day. And she kind of turned a little red and she was like, it's really hard to explain. But when I've gone to all my practices and they go really well, and we're like, you're around community with like-minded people, and then game day just goes so amazing. I knew immediately, even though she couldn't fully articulate it, it was because she takes the time to show up every single practice, just like Michael Jordan, right? Michael Jordan was the first on and the first off. Kobe Bryant was the same. They were the ones that worked just as hard, if not harder. And it wasn't necessarily the toil. They did it because of the love of the game. Their focus was on winning. Well, what do winners do? Winners get really good at what they do because they're practicing their craft. Does that make sense? So it's a different perspective than, oh my gosh, I don't think I'm good enough, so I'm just going to keep going and keep going and keep going, right? Because they also had coaches in their corner that upped their game, right? Is it Phil? I'm going to butcher his name. Phil Spector? Phil Johnson? Anyways, Coach Phil, okay? Now, Coach Phil only ever won one game, like one championship. As a player, he was not the best player. He was fantastic as a coach, right? So if he had continually focused on, I need to get better as a player, he would have been beating his head against the wall, because it would have been so much harder for him, because that's not where his natural talents and abilities lie. He was really good at taking his knowledge and his experience of what he had done, right? And this is why I have some beef with people who are like, well, those who can do, and those who can't do, teach. No, teaching is a gift. It's a skill set, right? So imagine if Coach Phil, who had coached Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, I think LeBron James too, like, what if that coach had said, I need to just become a better player? And he never actually went into coaching. All of these other champions may not have been fully developed because he made them better. Does that make sense? That's what happens when we focus on the right things. When we focus from a place of lack because we want to make things harder because we're trying to justify our actions, we're wasting a lot of time. I was listening to Tiffany Montgomery the other day, and she said, we don't need time, we need God. Like, God does not need time. Whether or not you believe in God or anything else, like, the reality is there are things that happen in life, divinely, cosmically, scientifically even, that are nearly impossible to explain. And as a result, it doesn't require more time. It doesn't require more time. It requires us having the leap of faith and belief such that we focus on the right things. And when we have our attention like blinders on, then we do the right things that are in line with those intentions. Does this make sense? So, like, if you want to be wealthy, but you're focusing on, I can't afford it, I can't afford it, I can't afford it. And I get it. I get it. There are things in the reality of like where we are, but instead of saying like I can't, because again, where's your focus? Your language is implying that instead of wanting to be wealthy and doing what you can to be wealthy, that you're actually focusing on lack, 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 lack. And that's what you're going to continually have because that's what you are actually speaking life over and over and over again, instead of rising up and saying, how can I afford it? How can I afford it? How could this be possible? Right? Oh, that's not possible. Oh, Susan, you just don't know. I'm special. My business is special. That will never work for me. Okay. So then how could it work for you? Do you see what I mean? Like just a different perspective. It's a different focus. It's a 1 degree shift. And it might feel like you've jumped 180 degrees because when you're not used to thinking this way, your brain, which is number 2, your brain will choose how you filter life based off of how you continually focus. It's a self-perpetuating and self-fulfilling prophecy, meaning that if you think, and this is, glass half full, glass half empty sort of perspective, but there is science behind this, which is why I'm explaining this. Your brain changes every second just by sure fact that you are here listening to me or anything else. So whatever you listen to has the opportunity to shift your perspective for the good or for the bad. Okay. And that's not a judgment call. It's just like, again, what your focus is. And again, based off of your past perspective. So your brain is constantly filtering and saying good or bad, good or bad, good or bad. Our brains typically don't like black and white they typically don't like gray thinking. Our brains like black and white because your amygdala, and you can look this up, your amygdala, AMYGDALA, literally has one job, and that's to keep you alive. It is the most ancient part of your brain. It's called the lizard brain. And if you are in a do or die situation, which most of the time we're not, but your brain still thinks it is. And so it will override the adult part of your brain, which is your prefrontal cortex, which is right here. Your thinking brain is here. Your lizard brain is back here. Okay? So if you're doing things, and again, your lizard brain, because it's like at the back part of your head, a lot of the things that are happening are subconscious simply because of where it's located. Okay? It's hidden, it's deep embedded near the skull of your brain. It's very protected. Okay? So over the years, it still has only one function: to keep you alive. And most of the time, it thinks you are dying. That literally, like your brain is going to go, oh my gosh, we didn't have coffee today. We're dying. That's why sometimes you're like, why am I reacting this way? Because of your brain. Because of your brain. Okay. When you're cold, your brain is going to go, oh my God, that's not good. We're dying. Okay. Now I'm exaggerating, obviously, because it's funnier, but this is what's going on inside your system, your human system, your circulatory, your digestive, your respiratory, your nervous system, especially. Hello, Maria. Yes, it's been such a long time. So glad you could join. So your brain is literally going to filter good, bad, good, bad, good, bad. And that's why when you are trying to focus on something that's really important to you and you are like, why can't I get this done? If it is causing a significant response inside your body, typically a stress response, your brain is maybe going to shut down and say, that's not okay. That's trying to kill us. And we don't want that, even though you might want the outcome. Does this make sense? Your brain just does not know that yet. Now, caveat, because the interesting thing is that, because you might be going, well, but Susan, I keep having these situations happening that I don't want to happen. Why isn't my brain helping me then, based off of what you just shared? Because when you have gone through trauma, and trauma is big T, but also little t, okay? And trauma is, again, dependent on your own past experience, not just personally, but also genetically. This is proven by epigenetics. Don't believe, you can Google all of this, okay? And again, sometimes I'm going to get it wrong because I'm a human. I'm still learning. I'm still evolving. And sometimes I just forget. Such is life. But with epigenetics, you might have the cancer gene, right? You might have a dementia gene, but it might not fire for you, meaning like it's not going to suddenly go, ooh, you're going to get this, you're going to get that. You might have it, but it's not going to fire and do the thing. Like it's not going to go into like, okay, this is what we do, making tumors, making this, making that inside of your system. Science doesn't know why some do and some don't. What we do know is that the more trauma that we have experienced, the more resilient we become because you're still here, right? But the interesting thing about our brain is that when your amygdala knows that you can survive, then it's going to automatically think that's safe. Who's tracking with me? Who just got like a what? So as an example, when I was a kid, I used to get beaten. And I don't mean like, but really, I mean, we would get in fights. I used to get beaten. I was bullied as a kid. I used to get people making fun of me, like all kinds of horrendous stuff. I'm not going to entertain them here, but I needed to give you an example because we've all maybe seen this portrayed on media, in our lives, what have you, maybe being the victim of this. I survived. But here's the thing. There have been times in my life where I have not spoken up or not done what I wanted to do and almost like frozen because, number one, my body responded. Number two, my brain realized you're not going to die, Susan. We already went through that, right? We already went through that. I've been in a knife fight. God willing, it's not going to happen again. But I'm here to tell the tale, right? And I know that my brain is not going to operate the same way as somebody else who has never experienced a knife fight because I know that I'm going to be safe. That might mean that I do a stupid thing. Okay. So I'm going to have to know that in advance to override and to really think, don't operate from my amygdala, right? Which is basically like Neanderthal 2-year-old self, and operate from my fully functioning adult 40 plus, going on 50-year brain up here, which is at the front of my head. This is my thinking brain. This is my logical brain. This is my linear brain. Prefrontal cortex. This is what creates decisions. This is what creates multi-layered decisions. So if you're struggling to do things that require more timing, that require more complexity, chances are your executive functioning has been impacted. How do I know? Because I've lived through it. I've had to go through all of these things with breakdown, with burnout, with health crises. Okay. So I'm not a doctor, but side note, I went and did pre-med. God will use all things. Okay. But I share this because sometimes it's more helpful to have it come from somebody who has learned experience as opposed to a doctor telling you all the doctory sort of stuff. But I can also give you some words that you can go and now research so that you can find more information, should, would, that you could. Okay. So that's number two. So number one, because we're talking all about focus, was we're complicating things, we're making them harder in order to justify and make it feel like we deserve it, that we're worthy of it. Okay. Some of that's not all on us. It can be genetic. Number two, again, a lot of these follow through genetic patterns as well. So chances are you're here because you're here to break chains for your generation, your bloodline, your family, leave a different legacy. So number two is how our choices filter what it is that we see. And so what we've done in the past will filter what we see as possible moving forward. And it also funnels our focus. Okay. Because our brain is literally wiring and rewiring over and over and over again to solidify the thoughts, the patterns, the behaviors, the identities of who we already know us to be. Like, because again, that's safe. And that means that we get to live another day. That's the sole focus of your brain. Okay. Your brain is a supercomputer and it has one job, and that's to make sure that you live until tomorrow, live until another hour. And a lot of the things that we logically, again, this part of our brain, prefrontal cortex, we logically know are completely safe, our amygdala is going to go, you're going to die. Don't do that. Okay. So that's number two. Our neural pathways are literally being formed even right now. And you can Google a video where somebody's learning how to play piano, somebody's learning how to read a book, somebody's watching a TV show, and you can see the neurons in your brain suddenly making new pathways. It's like taking, your superhighway. So I live on the West Coast. So like the I-5 goes straight north to south, right? Through multiple countries. So it would be like taking the I-5. We don't think about it. It's just zoom, 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 zoom. And then all of a sudden being like, oh, stop. The road's closed. Oh, okay. So then how do I get to the coast? Well, I'm going to have to take this little tiny road, right? I'm going to first take like a little interstate highway, and then I'm probably going to have to take another country road. And maybe I even have to take like a gravel road. Every time we do that, as you know, it's like, it's more uncomfortable because that is the path less traveled. It doesn't get used as often. And so we have to really focus so that we don't go off path. Whereas the I-5, I don't have to think about it. It's paved, it's smooth, it's busier, but I know the way, the road is clear. Like it's super easy. There's clear signage, there's lights. Do you know what I mean? Okay. So that's number two. Our focus, we need to understand this in order to be able to help ourselves to focus on the things that are the most important for us. And then the third thing is there's always two sides of the coin. So again, I shared, and I gave homework last time on my last video where I asked, how long could you go without complaining? And number two, could you stop saying, I can't afford it? Because we don't say that in this house. We haven't said it for a long time, but my children will say it because they pick it up from school. Okay. And that's not to say that there are things that we can or cannot afford. So I'm going to give you a bonus tip. Here's some language that you can use. That's not a priority right now, right? We're choosing to spend our money or our time or our attention or our energy, whatever is the resource, because it's not always about money, but we're choosing to prioritize something else. That's not something that we are going to be able to entertain, right? So, because children need to learn boundaries, adults need to learn boundaries. So two sides of the same coin. And that means that when we look at things, are we looking at it from glass half full, or really glass full, 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 or that glass is empty and I don't know where I'm going to get some? Because if we keep thinking, I can't afford it, I can't afford it, I can't afford it, and expecting other people to accommodate for our own inability to see how they see, that's their problem. Does this make sense? That comes from fear and from lack. Where I come from, I'm a follower of God and Jesus. God does not give me a spirit of fear, but power. He gives me power, but I have to use it. He gives me love, but I have to feel it. I have to believe it, right? I have to receive it, and a sound mind. Most of us are not operating from a sound mind, let me tell you. And some of it's not through any fault of your own. Some of it is because you're blindly following the masses. If that's you, I'm going to encourage you to really create some boundaries around, what do I spend my time on? Who am I listening to? Who am I letting into my thoughts and my ears and my mind? Because if I need to have a sound mind and I'm listening to people who are like just railing on social about all kinds of negativity, that's going to impact you. How could it not? Right? It's just like eating something that has mold in it. If you eat something with mold, you're not going to feel very good. But again, if you're healthy, you might be fine. Somebody else, a friend of mine, is extremely sensitive to mold. So guess what happens when she has mold? She comes down with mucus, coughing. She might, if she's around somebody who might have like even the sniff of a cold, she's going to get sick because now her immune system is compromised. How many compromises are we making with our focus? Does this make sense? So you can lead a horse to water, but you can't force anybody to drink, right? I have a resource on Facebook. I did it at the start of the pandemic. I think it's like more than 50 ways to generate cash in your business. If you implemented one of those, two of those, three of those, I guarantee that you would make money. How can I give that guarantee? Because I personally have used just about every single one of those, or because I crowdsourced a bunch of those, or people who have made money using one of those strategies shared it with me. Like gave me like, hey, because I literally went on and said, guys, like, can we crowdsource a bunch of ideas to help people because the world has shut down and everybody was focused on what? Oh my God, I can't do this. I can't do that. I can't go out. I can't do my job. I can't make money. Like, what are you focusing on? Right? Again, it was designed to create fear. Right? Now, I'm not speaking about the greater world at large around all of that. But what I can say is that we don't control what happens around us. Most of us we're not that powerful. Now, I work for a creator that's way more powerful. But that being said, here on earth, we operate within rules and regulations that keep all of us as safe as possible. Whether or not we believe or agree, such is life. Go and try and be the people who are in charge. Okay. More power to you. That's not me. If you decided that you wanted it, you would go and seek out that information, right? Like I just gave you, hey, there is a whole training resource on my Facebook business page all about, and I think we might have put it on my podcast as well, Master the Sales Game, all about like 50 plus ways to create cash in your business. If you needed cash, you would go and watch, listen, do all the things. But more importantly than that, number one, you would decide that it's possible for you, right? Because there's no point in going and then listening to something and going, oh, well, that'll never work for me. right? You've already counted yourself out of the game. Where is your focus? You're focusing on lack. You're focusing on limitations. You're focusing on impossibility. There's two sides to every coin, right? Number two is to be prepared to execute, to do work. Does it have to be super hard? No, but I guarantee that the first time that you do something, just like the first time we do anything, it will feel hard. It will feel uncomfortable for exactly the reasons that I've just outlined. Number one is that we overcomplicate things. And number two, because we feel like it can't be that easy. It can't be that easy. And me making way more money than I even made in a day, a week, a year, ever in my life, in the span of like, boom, right? Why not? Why not you? There's somebody else who's going to be the next millionaire, the next billionaire. Heck, why can't it be you? That's food for thought. Like, let that land, right? Like, if there's somebody who is supposed to be making $100 today, or $1,000 today, or 10,000, or 100,000, or $1 million, or $1 billion, if there is somebody out there who is supposed to be making that anyways, like, it's going to happen, right? Like, it's going to happen. Why can't it happen for you? I heard that and I was like, huh, that just shifted my perspective, right? Like, if I'm going to tell my kids this, why isn't it true for me too? I need to also be an example, and I can't just say one thing and be a hypocrite and then live my life completely different. That's not how we operate with our children. That's not how I operate in any area of my life, because how I do one thing is how I do all things. And I think sometimes we get so compartmentalized because our focus is like, this is how I be here and this is how I be here. And a lot of times that flip-flopping, I mean, the Bible says a double-minded man is dangerous, right? I'm just saying. Because the two sides to one coin is not about being double-minded. The two sides to one coin is looking at from a distance, like pulling back with perspective. Because when you're up close to something, like if I was, because there's writing on here, if I was right here, oh God, if I'm right here, it's making me go cross-eyed because I can't focus, right? So I actually need to, even here, because it's wrapping around the mug, it's hard for me to focus. I have to pull back. So here I can start to read it, and here it actually is better, right? Part of this is my age. But we need to zoom out. We need to zoom out, because often the things that we want in life, when we zoom out, we are able to see both sides, not just one side, right? We are able to see, and sometimes there's more than two. Sometimes there's multiple ways. As the saying goes, there's many ways to skin a cat, right? But you can't see that if you're in the thick of things, if you're way down in the weeds, if you're like scrambling to survive. If all you're thinking is, I need to stay alive, number one, you need to calm down your system, because unless you, and I guarantee if you're watching me right here, none of us are in that situation, because by sheer fact that you are watching me guarantees that you are still in the top 10% of the world. I know that you may or may not understand that, but the fact that you have high-speed data enough that you can watch this, that you have a device that allows you to see me, that we are somehow connected on some kind of a platform, that you already are leaps and bounds ahead of knowing, because on here, I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Okay, not everybody in the world knows about these things. Not everybody in the world has access to even data that would allow for this stream. I know it sounds crazy, but we take for granted because we have a very specific perspective, right? This is our focus. When we take a step back, right? My kiddo went to a third world country, and that's a whole story for another day. But the part that I wanted to share, they were not allowed to use any devices. Now, my kid's 17, going on 18. His whole life has been devices because this is the era that he grew up in, right? So I was very curious. And we were like very thankful and grateful that he had this opportunity to experience that. Because how many of us, how many grown-ups could go a week with no Wi-Fi, no data, no cell phone, nothing? Could you do it? Could you do it? I'll be honest, I'd be hard pressed. I'd be hard pressed. And not because I'm addicted to my phone, but because there's so many things that I rely on that require my phone. This is the way that I connect to my family, to my friends, to my clients, to you, right? But it allowed him to understand that that part of the world, like he would complain about how slow our connection is and like this and that. It gave him such a good perspective because he fully realized and appreciated that, wow, what mom's talked about is true, right? So, two sides to every coin. Are we looking at things from an old perspective? The Bible calls this old wine, right? But are we looking at things and immediately gravitating towards the negative? Because maybe you are more of a pessimistic or more of a, devil's advocate. And I'm very mindful of my words, but these are words that we use, right? Are you the one that's really more realistic? I was that person. It's like, wait, have you thought about this and this and this and this? And I've always been an optimist, but also a realist, right? And so understanding that about myself, I give myself the opportunity to get all of the logical stuff out of the way so that I can actually do what God has called me to do, which often looks impossible. Like it just, and I've had people my whole life because I'm small. I'm 5'2". I'm not going to tell you how much I weigh, but I'm slim. Okay. I'm muscular because I'm gaining strength, but I'm slim. Most people, when they meet me, are like, I thought you would be a lot bigger. I live life large because I take up space, and I take up all the space that I am meant to take up because I belong. But I've had to fight to get there. Does this make sense? And I don't do it from a perspective of get out of my way. I do it just because this is my being. This is who I be. I don't need to prove anything to anybody. I just am. I am all of me. It took 40 plus years to get here. Okay. So what I want you to know is that when we are focused on the impossible, the world would have us focus on all of the reasons why it's not possible, right? Like you're focused on the impossible, thinking it is possible. Watch me do it. And the world is going to go, yeah, I don't know that that's going to work. And here's all the reasons why. And they're going to ask you to meet them where they are, to lower your standards, and to not have as firm boundaries. So like, as an example, so who on here is I know a bunch of you are entrepreneurs, right? Like you have your own business. When I started my business, and I may or may not have shared this, but the very first clients that I wanted to help, I have a deep compassion for humans. I've learned how to be more cutthroat because as somebody who literally can feel other people's feelings and think their thoughts, I know that that's a gift that's been provided to me through God and Holy Spirit. But when I was little, I didn't understand this. And so imagine walking into a room and being bombarded by sensations that you don't know don't belong to you. I didn't know that these didn't belong to me. All I knew was I could feel like the first time that I fully allowed myself to step into this, because God showed this to me. I was at an event, Marketing Impact Academy, and I sat next to this woman who, and I'm an introvert, so I'm giving you some of this tea just so you have some perspective. So I sat down at the end of the aisle because we were told to go around and network, and she was there, I think, with her mom and maybe a girlfriend. They were in. They weren't right. I wasn't right next to her, but there was a space. I didn't need to sit there. I sat down and this woman looked over at me and she had a black ball cap on. She was very fit and trim, blonde, peppy, and all wearing black, right? She looked very stylish, but it was like black t-shirt, black jeans, black ball cap, blonde hair through the back. And she just looked at me. And in that look, I knew immediately I had disgruntled her because she was just like, why are you sitting here? That kind of look. Okay. So as I sat there and I'm, sitting, writing notes, just like, okay, I did what hopefully I wanted to network. No, it's not going to happen. Not feeling the love. Okay. I sat down and no joke, the left side of my face started to go like this. Okay. Now, I don't know if it physically looked like that, but internally, I felt it. I felt my face feel like it was drooping. And I started to get this massive pounding headache. And I suddenly felt so sad. Now, if you've never been to this event, it's like popping, like dance music. It's like a dance show, okay? Dancing and jumping around and all the things. And I thought, well, that's really odd, right? I had considered myself, because again, this is how important focus is and how powerful our brains can be. For much of my life, because of trauma and lots of different types, and resilience, I had just decided and disciplined myself that I was not open to that opportunity. I was not going to be available to be hurt over and over and over again. And so even though people hurt me, it didn't hurt. It still hurt. My brain was like, what's going on? We don't like this, Susan. And every time I survived, it would go, whew, we're okay. Okay, well, that's not so bad. We can survive, so it must be okay, right? And I might go into this in a little more detail later. But for now, I realized then that those emotions did not belong to me. My brain was so strong in blocking out what I had experienced as a child that it had put up a wall. Like, that's how intense our focus can be. So our brains are amazing. And it is, if you don't believe how much our brains can change, I want you to read The Brain. It's by Dr. Norman Doidge, Doidge. Okay, he has 2 books. Read them both. The Brain That Changes Itself, The Brain That Heals Itself. That's what started me on this path, because I was determined to figure out that if the problem was emanating from inside of me, then surely I had access to the solution. Surely I did, right? That was my belief. So I was on a relentless pursuit to prove either yay or nay. I completely forgot about it, actually, because I got healed. That was God's grace, right? But I still had to do the work. And I had to decide where I was going to put my focus, my time, and my attention. I retrained my brain to be an instrument for my good, instead of for my detriment, because that's what it was doing. So if we allow ourselves to fall into what I call pity city, negative Nelly, right? Where instead of rising up to where somebody else is and saying, how do I get what you have? Right? Like your life, how do I become more like that? Because that's what I desire. How do I stop getting stuck and getting in my own way? How do I stop being tripped up? And maybe tomorrow. And I keep saying maybe tomorrow, but God has been asking me to kind of talk a little bit more about my personal experiences in the online coaching space and how very different my perspective is and how you get sucked up. So if right now you're like, how did I get here? Friend, I get it. I understand. But I'm here to hopefully shift your focus back to you, back to what you know is true, so that you can find your true north. And more importantly, so that you can get where you want to be getting to. Does this make sense? Because I know that I am called to women who want wild amounts of wealth, and not just in money, in your health, in your relationships, in opportunities, in your influence, right? In your ability to impact not just your families, but your communities, the world at large. However it is that you're meant to be up and up and up and up. But I know, so I've said this before, get you someone in your corner who can see bigger for yourself than you can. I believe in big things for each of you. I believe that's why God has sent me to you. But does that mean that I'm going to lower my standards and say, well, oh, thank you, Holy Spirit, that, let me just appease you down here? No, because that doesn't do you a service or me. Does this make sense? Because I'm going to tell you that when we get coddled, and any parent knows this, the more that you coddle your child, the more that you keep doing for your child. And you no longer are able to empower your child to do what they need to do for themselves. Does this make sense? Like, and I know the running joke is, well, there's nobody who's like 5, 10, 15 who's still in diapers. How do we know? Nobody's talking about that, right? And I'm not talking about like push them out before they're ready, but why are we not encouraging our children to be bigger? I have a client, her son wrote a best-selling book before he was 8. Some of you are challenged to write your own book. Do the darn thing. You're overthinking things. This is your focus because you're focusing on the wrong things. You're focusing on all the ways that you don't know enough, that you don't have enough, that you're missing, instead of focusing on what is the thing that God has given you that's uniquely just for you, that you are called to, and only focus on that because that's what you want. If you want to help people and your book is going to help people, then why don't you have the book out? I'm talking to myself too, right? An 8-year-old, for shame. Like, come on. Right? That's why Jesus said, come to me as a child. Children have no preconceived notions. Like you tell a child they can't do it, they're like, why? Why? Right? No, I do it. I do it. I just remember my daughter saying that from the time she was 6 months old. No, honey, we're not, no. Yes, mama. Mama, I do. Mama, I do it. Mama, I do it. And she would just pull out stuff. And I think, surely this child doesn't know anything about the clothes that she wants or the colors that she desires. Oh, yes, she did. You betcha. Time she was 6 months old, she knew what she wanted. Right? As parents, as adults, we need to pay attention because I say this because society and parents, well-meaning teachers, we try to squash other people's desires because, again, our brain is thinking that's not safe. Well, it is safe. Just because it hasn't been done before and you don't know what the outcome is, doesn't mean that it's not safe. But your brain is going to say, we don't know what's going to happen. And so it's going to go automatically to worst case scenario, which is we're going to die. Does this make sense? So the very first set of clients that I had, and side note, when I started my business, I was still healing. I was not well. I built my business to 6 figures in sales in under 6 months with a 20-year runway. So I don't want anybody judging themselves. Your journey is your journey, but I'm telling you this because it can happen fast. When you give God the reins and you just let go of control, which that's the hardest part, right? Especially as high achieving women, we want control. We're self-reliant. Self-control and discipline is not the same as control. I want to just let that land, okay? Because we mistake those two and then we get ourselves in hot water because then we're controlling situations that we were never meant to control. We're meant to have self-control, which is keep captive our minds, right? Meditate on, for me, it's the word of God. So what are you meditating on? What are you focusing on? What are you allowing into your mind? What are you then actually living out and breathing out in your day-to-day, everyday society? Like, this is what you do as a meaningful member of society. So when I built this business, the first iteration, okay, because it's constantly evolving, I already knew my prices. I was like, okay, I have a set amount at 3,000 because it's just me, like my time. At this point, I had already proven well over $600 million worth of sales. I am not a sales expert, but I am. Does this make sense? Like, that's what I do, but that's not who I am. Let that land. The processes and the frameworks, the methodologies that I have developed inside of a global 300, right? It's not a rinky-dink organization, has gone on to produce billions of dollars worth of revenue for that company in a non-traditional sales environment. It's in finance. It's not what you would typically think of when you think of like sales. So when I created that business, I knew that my time is precious. My energy is precious because I had a breakdown I was recovering from. So $3,000 for 3 months. Okay. I had 2 amazing women that I desperately wanted to help. And I saw such great things for them, but they could not see it for themselves because they were focused on fear, lack, uncertainty, unworthiness. And immediately when they came to the call, they already knew. They were like, oh, I'm pretty sure I can't afford you, but I'm here anyways, like hat in hand, sort of like, pick me, sort of like this, almost like begging. Okay. Side note, don't ever come to any sort of situation like that. You are worthy and you have value. Whether or not you have the money is irrelevant. Okay. And anybody that makes you feel otherwise, don't work with them. On the flip side, as a business owner, just because somebody can't afford you has nothing to do with you as a business. You do not have to lower your standards or change your boundaries in order to accommodate a client. And in fact, every time that I've done this because my heart, it's bitten me in the butt because I know better working for that global company. Plus my clients, plus my parents have had a business since I was basically born. Okay. As soon as they said, because I had a fear of, oh, what if my price is just like, I want to help all these women. I don't know if they, and I broke my cardinal rule, which was I focused on what I thought they might have in their wallet. What people have or don't have is none of my business, because I've seen what they actually have in their wallet, and more importantly, what they do or don't have and how they still spend. Okay. Like literally, because I was working in banking. So I already had a default. I had like a plan B of, oh, well, here's how I could still help them. And that's the offer that I made was, well, we'll reduce the number of calls and it'll be half the price. And I was really reluctant because I was like, because I still wanted to help them. It wasn't so much about the money. It was really like, I know I can help them. I want them to be able to get some help. How can I make this a win-win for both of us? But when I talked to my husband afterwards, and he knew immediately, and he was like, are they even going to get the results? And I said, oh, I don't know. And in my heart, I knew that in order for where they were and where they needed to go, the intensity of that focus, the time and the attention, but it was more, it's the support and it's the container, right? That it would do them a disservice. So I pulled the offer. I said, you know what? Actually, I can't help you. Like, I can't help you the way that you want to be helped because this is the only offer that I have. And immediately signed my next client at 3K. Signed 3 clients at 3K and then went up to 5. 5, I think 5, 8, 10, 15, 25. And then it kept going up because there was only one of me, supply and demand, but also results. Now, some of those results I cannot share. The other part is these clients would have been successful whether or not they worked with me because their focus was, I'm going to be successful no matter what. I'm willing to do what it takes no matter what. Not from a hustle and grind, I'm going to like pursue until I'm dead in the ground, but I'm willing to get out of my own way. I am willing to pursue with passion. I am willing to be honest about where I need help. I am willing to stop making things harder and to choose the path of least resistance when it presents itself. I'm willing to lean in and to have faith and have trust. I'm willing to be generous, right? Of my time, my energy, my attention. I'm willing to ask for help and be humble and to be a beginner. I'm willing to believe that it's possible instead of fighting tooth and nail with every strategy. And so the online space in particular likes to make you feel like if you don't do it the way that everybody else is doing it, that you're doing it wrong. And I want to break that off of whoever is here. Because I did things very differently. And immediately people tried to fit me in a box and they tried to make me do it the way that they were doing it because they made me feel like I was doing it wrong. And it sent me down a rabbit hole for years. Okay. Again, triggered by my own past perspective, the way that my brain was wired already. And although I was rewiring it along with my health for business, a lot of our business decisions are here in your prefrontal cortex. And I had actually had executive dysfunction. Okay. I had like traumatic brain injury, which nobody actually fully diagnosed. I realized kind of after the fact, and that was partly through God. I say just, but that's everything, right? Because I realized, why was it so hard for me to do all these things? I thought I was neurodivergent. Maybe I have ADD and ADHD. No, I don't. I had executive dysfunction, which sometimes if you have these other neurodivergent issues with brain, it can impact because it's a decision-making center. Okay, it's a decision-making center. Food can impact here. Okay, a lot of foods impact here. A lot of social media can impact here. Okay, and it was through multiple conversations with my therapist at the time, because I've closed my garage door on the back of my car. I have forgotten to pick up my children from school. They go to school every day. Okay. I didn't always recognize what time it was, because what my eyes saw and what my brain computed were not the same. Okay. It's one of the reasons why, and I've shared this part of the story, where I could not read. I know how to read. I'm actually a speed reader. But when I tried to read, it was like the words were floating on the page and floating in my brain, but it went nowhere. So it was like I would read a word, read a sentence, and then it disappeared. And then I read the next sentence, and there was no connection between that and that. My brain couldn't focus, because all it was thinking was, we're not safe. We're not safe. We're not safe. Because the amygdala of my brain was so wound up in such a high stress response. And when we are stressed out, and you might not even recognize that you're stressed, right? This is the crazy part, because when you're exposed to stress all the time, it becomes your normal. It becomes your normal. And that amygdala is going to go, well, this is okay because we survived. So this is okay. Like, we would rather be stressed than to have this situation over here where we don't know if we're going to survive. We don't know if that's going to make us die. Even though logically it is safer. Does this make sense? And that's why sometimes we do things that after the fact, you're going to beat yourself up and go, why did I do that? What in the world made me think that would be okay? And then we repeat and we repeat and we repeat. Does this make sense? So we literally have to unhook it. And these are pattern interrupts. And unfortunately, the marketing world uses pattern interrupts all the time, but they use it in a way, I believe, to damage us in predatory ways. And so if you have been exposed to trauma, which, side note, who hasn't? If you've lived through life, chances are you've been exposed to trauma in some way, right? And so it triggers a trauma. And that's why I had shared before. I said, if you are doing something out of fear, which I've talked about fear of missing out, I know. And if you find stuff on, my marketing, my pages, where it is feeling like fear of missing out, please let me know. Because again, I know better. I'm doing better. But there was a period of my life, I want to call it the dark ages of the marketing world, where I slipped into a slippery slope of doing things the way that everybody else tells you to do it. And because I felt like I didn't know enough in the online marketing space, even though I have extensive marketing and sales background knowledge, I was like, I'm a good student. I'm gonna learn how they're doing it. If you are being triggered by fear of missing out, and I'm not talking about real scarcity and real urgency, because there are real urgencies and real scarcities to your offers. But if you are purposefully using fear of missing out in order to trigger people, this is why the online course industry has dismal completion rates. Dismal, right? This is why a lot of people are just satisfied with, I made a lot of money, but I don't get a lot of repeat sales. When I first started, I was so